My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. And last Christmas, one sentence finally exposed a truth my family had spent decades pretending didn't exist. For most of my life, I wasn't a daughter. I was background noise. The kind that fills the room, but never gets acknowledged. My mother could talk for an hour about my brother's ideas, his dreams, his potential, without once asking me a real question. Not how are you? Not what are you working on? Just silence where curiosity should have been. I learned early how to sit at the edge of the table, how to finish my homework alone while applause echoed for someone else in the house. I got used to being invisible. Until that night. Christmas dinner looked exactly like it always had. The same heavy table, turkey carved too early, mashed potatoes losing heat, Christmas lights blinking outside the window like nothing in the world had ever changed. My mom leaned toward my brother, Alex, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny, promising, again, that she'd help him however she could. I was there too, quietly cutting my food, practicing the art of taking up as little space as possible. Then Alex looked at me. That familiar smirk, the one he'd worn since childhood, the one that said he knew where he stood and where I didn't. "So," he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "are you still wasting your time on that worthless company of yours?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just shrugged. "Actually," I said, calm enough to surprise even myself, "I sold my company." The table went silent. Not awkward silence, not polite silence, the kind of silence that sucks the oxygen out of a room. Alex let out a short laugh under his breath. "That worthless company," he made air quotes with his fingers. "Sure, how much did you sell it for?" I looked him straight in the eye. $150 million. His jaw dropped. Literally. My mother's face drained of color so fast it was almost shocking. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. And in that moment, every year she had ignored me, every time she made me feel small, every time she invested everything in him and nothing in me, came crashing back, not onto me, but onto her. If you think this story is about money, it's not. It's about what it costs a family when they decide one child matters more than the other. Because I wasn't always the woman who could sit at a Christmas table and say, $150 million, without flinching. At 8 years old, I was just the quiet kid standing in the kitchen doorway, gripping a chipped plastic cup, watching my brother's 13th birthday turn into a public ceremony. Alex was 5 years older than me, and from the beginning, he was the center of gravity in our house. That birthday, my mother, Karen, rolled a brand new mountain bike into our backyard. It gleamed in the sunlight. Neighbors clapped. Kids cheered. Someone yelled that Alex was going places. My mom hugged him so tightly it looked like she was afraid the world might steal him away. She whispered how proud she was, how special he was. I stood a few feet back in an old thrift store t-shirt. No one asked me to step into the pictures. For Alex's birthdays, there were balloons, parties, layered cakes, entire weekends built around him. For mine, there was usually a cheap Costco cake, a rushed apology, and a reminder that things were busy this year. When Alex graduated, he got Disneyland. I got a drugstore card and cash left on the counter. When he reached school age, my mom fought tooth and nail to get him into an expensive private school. Crisp uniforms, new sneakers, soccer practice, piano lessons, summer camps that cost more than our car. I went to the local public school with peeling paint and textbooks older than the teachers. When I asked why things were so different, my mom would pat my shoulder and say, "Alex needs special stimulation. He's really smart. He has so much potential. You're fine, Emily. You'll be fine." At first, it sounded like reassurance. Eventually, I understood what it really meant. "We don't have to try for you." My dad worked long hours at a bank and mostly stayed out of it. Decisions about money, schools, opportunities, those were my mom's domain. There was an invisible hierarchy in our house. Alex at the center, my mom orbiting him, my dad on the sidelines. And me. Somewhere near the edge, as long as I didn't cause trouble. By 12, I stopped asking for things. By 13, I stopped asking why. I didn't question why Alex got the newest phone while mine lagged years behind. I didn't ask why he got tutors while I borrowed outdated library books. I stopped running into the living room with my A+ tests because every time I did, my mom was already on the phone with Alex's teacher or driving him to practice. If I needed something, she sighed, "Do you really need it?" For Alex, the answer was always yes. For me, it was always later. So I learned to handle things myself. I taught myself to cook basic meals from YouTube because I didn't want to ask for money. I picked up dishwashing shifts at a coffee shop and hid my tips in a jar in my closet. That jar became my first used laptop. And quietly, without realizing it, I began collecting something far more valuable than resentment. I collected independence. At the dinner table, conversations revolved around Alex, his scores, his games, his future. I was present but never included. Not the story, just the extra chair. Somewhere in those years, something shifted inside me. I stopped trying to be seen. And I started planning a life that wouldn't require permission. I didn't know it yet, but all those silent nights were becoming fuel. Fuel for an idea, fuel for a company, fuel for the moment my mother would finally be forced to look at the daughter she'd trained herself not to see. College was supposed to be my escape. I got into the University of Washington with a partial scholarship for computer science. I reread the acceptance email 3 times just to be sure it was real. My mom smiled and said, "That's great, honey." Then asked me to proofread an email to one of Alex's teachers. A week later, Alex got into Stanford. There was champagne, relatives, tears, a banner in the living room. My mom told everyone her son was going to change the world. When I left for UW, she hugged me at the curb and drove off because she was running late. When Alex left, she flew down with him, decorated his dorm, and posted an entire photo album online. I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 roommates and a used comforter I bought myself. And that's where the real story began. The apartment near campus wasn't much to look at. Thin walls, a heater that rattled like it might give up every winter, 2 roommates whose schedules never lined up with mine. But for the first time in my life, no one compared me to Alex inside those walls. That alone felt like oxygen. My scholarship covered part of tuition, not the rest. So I worked. A lot. Starbucks, 4 blocks from campus. Morning shifts that started before sunrise. I'd wake up at 4:30 a.m., pull on the green apron, and spend hours smiling at strangers while spelling their names wrong on cups. Then I'd rush straight to lectures with coffee stains on my sleeves and sleep deprivation buzzing behind my eyes. Between classes, I lived in the library. Not the romantic version. The corner desk near the outlet, where the carpet smelled faintly like dust and burned coffee. My laptop was used, slow, and held together by hope. I couldn't afford most textbooks, so I watched free coding lectures on YouTube and Coursera, pausing and rewinding until concepts finally clicked. While other students joined clubs, went to parties, networked, I learned how to build things. It didn't feel lonely. It felt focused. The idea that changed everything didn't arrive with fireworks. It came wrapped in complaints. My friends were exhausted, all the time. They skipped sleep, ate junk, lived on caffeine, then wondered why their bodies felt broken. "I wish something would just tell me when to drink water," my roommate said one night, collapsing onto the couch. That sentence stuck. I sat at a sticky cafe table between shifts and started sketching ideas in a cheap notebook. What if one app tracked the basics? Sleep, movement, food, water, not complicated, not judgmental, just helpful. Friendly reminders instead of alarms, simple visuals, no guilt. I called it Health Track because every better name I thought of was already taken. At night, I coded until 2 a.m. instant noodles on the desk. Cold coffee, bugs everywhere. The first version was ugly, but it worked. You could log meals, workouts, sleep, water, see patterns. I gave it to friends and told them to be honest. They destroyed it. This button sucks. I forgot to log. There's no reminder. Why is this chart so ugly? It hurt, then I fixed it. More people started using it. Word spread quietly. A positive review made me cry in the bathroom at work. When the app earned its first $500 in ad revenue, I stared at the dashboard like it might disappear. It wasn't much, but it was more than my family had ever invested in me. I bought a slightly better laptop and kept going. Around that time, Alex would call from Stanford, talking about parties, networking events, how insane tech culture was there. My mom would gush about his future. One night, I tried telling her about HealthTrack. I've got over 1,000 users, I said. People actually use it. That's nice, sweetie, she replied, before launching into how Alex might get an internship because his professor liked him. I stopped bringing it up. While she talked about his potential, my app quietly installed itself on strangers' phones. Graduating early wasn't strategic, it was survival. Extra credits meant less tuition. While classmates planned gap years, I signed a lease on a tiny office in Seattle's tech district. Flickering lights, ugly carpet, parking lot view. To me, it was a kingdom. I incorporated, opened a business account, moved my life into that room, days blurred into nights. Customer support, coding, marketing tutorials. Every review got a reply, every feature request got attention. Downloads grew. Then gyms reached out, trainers, insurance companies asking questions. I said yes to everything. I built a premium tier, nothing fancy, just deeper insights for a few dollars a month. When annual revenue hit $50,000, the room tilted. I hired 2 junior developers, kids like me, hungry, overlooked. We ate cheap takeout and shipped updates weekly. Meanwhile, Alex's Stanford dream cracked. His startup failed, burned through $100,000 of my mom's money. He moved home. Karen called me crying about how unfair the world was to her boy. She barely asked what I was doing. While Alex worked at Target, then Best Buy, talking about getting back into startups soon, I negotiated real partnerships. HealthTrack crossed 1 million users. Revenue climbed into 8 figures. I still drove an old Toyota, still wore hoodies, still ate Chipotle on the office couch. Then an email arrived. Strategic options. They offered $50 million. I said no. The signal traveled. VC money came, $8 million, enough to scale without losing control. We expanded, integrated with wearables, mental health tools, growth exploded. At 25, I bought a modest penthouse, IKEA furniture, plants I forgot to water. Then came the offer that stuck. $150 million. Months of negotiations, lawyers, numbers that didn't feel real. When I signed, I felt tired. After taxes, after bonuses, I walked away with about $90 million. I didn't call my mom. I called a therapist. Because money doesn't heal being invisible. And Christmas was coming. Therapy didn't look the way I expected it to. There was no dramatic breakthrough in the first session. No instant relief. Just a small, quiet room with neutral walls and a woman who didn't interrupt me when I paused mid-sentence. For the first time in my life, silence wasn't a dismissal. It was space. I talked about being fine, about how often I'd heard that word growing up. You'll be fine. You're independent. You don't need much. And how those sentences, stacked year after year, slowly taught me that needing anything at all was a failure. We talked about birthdays, about achievements no one noticed, about learning to celebrate myself in private because public celebration felt embarrassing when no one else joined in. I thought selling the company would fix something. It didn't. What it did was remove the last excuse. I could no longer tell myself that I'd feel whole once I made it. I had made it, and the old ache was still there. That's when my therapist asked a question that sat heavy in my chest for days. What would closure look like for you? Not revenge, not validation, closure. I didn't have an answer right away. I only knew what it didn't look like. It didn't look like buying my mother a house. It didn't look like rescuing Alex again. It didn't look like standing in front of them, begging to finally be chosen. Weeks passed. Sessions turned into months. I donated quietly to mental health nonprofits, especially ones that helped women who couldn't afford therapy. I hired slowly, paid my team well, built systems that didn't grind people down the way I had been ground down. Somewhere in that process, something surprising happened. Their approval stopped mattering. Not in a dramatic, I'm above this now way. In a quieter way. Like realizing you've been carrying a heavy bag for miles and setting it down without ceremony. But closure still lingered, like an unfinished sentence. Christmas approached, and for the first time in years, I caught myself looking at flights to Seattle. The suggestion didn't come from guilt. It came from curiosity. My therapist framed it like an experiment. You're not going to get something from them. She said, you're going to observe. You're different now. See how that changes the dynamic. Data collection. That made sense to me. I booked the flight without telling my mom anything about the sale. Just a simple text. I'm free this year if you still want me there. She replied instantly. Too instantly. Of course, Alex will be here too. It'll be just like old times. A heart emoji followed, like punctuation meant to soften the weight of that sentence. Old times were exactly what made my stomach tighten. I booked a hotel near the airport instead of staying at the house. That decision alone felt rebellious. For years, I'd slept on the sagging twin bed in my childhood room, surrounded by posters I'd outgrown and shelves of borrowed library books. This time, I wanted a door I could close. I landed in Seattle on a gray Christmas Eve afternoon. The clouds hung low, familiar and heavy. The air smelled like wet pavement and pine. I checked into the hotel, dropped my suitcase, and stood still for a long moment. White sheets, neutral art, no history. No younger version of me trying to earn space. On Christmas Day, I drove a rental car through the neighborhood I grew up in. Everything looked smaller. The park, the sidewalks, the house. Same faded blue paint, same lawn, plastic reindeer out front, one antler bent. The door opened before I knocked. My mom stood there in her flower-printed apron, cheeks flushed from the oven. For half a second, I saw the version of her I used to chase with drawings and test scores. Then it passed. Emily, she said, pulling me in a quick hug. Polite, evaluative. You look so grown up. Her eyes scanned my coat, my shoes, my face, like she was assessing a stranger's outfit. How work? She asked. Still doing your computer stuff? Yeah, I said, still doing that. She nodded, satisfied, and immediately launched into an update about Alex. How he was doing better. How he had a new idea. How hard he was working. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Nutmeg, sugar, dish soap. The artificial Christmas tree still leaned slightly to the left, loaded with ornaments from Alex's childhood teams and achievements. Framed photos lined the wall. Alex in football gear. Alex at Stanford. Alex shaking hands with someone important. I searched for myself. There was one picture from when we were kids. Alex on his bike. My mom's arm around him. Me on the edge of the frame, blurred and half cut off. Alex, my mom called toward the living room. Your sister, here. He stood up from the couch, beer in hand, one sock on, one off. Same posture, same confidence. Well, look at you, he said, smirking. The coding queen herself, still buried in that little app thing. My mom watched closely, waiting for me to play my old role. I smiled. Nice to see you too. In the kitchen, she handed me a dish towel without asking. Muscle memory. I chopped vegetables while she poured wine for Alex and herself. She gestured toward the tap for me. A small thing. But it said everything. They talked about his plans, about how she was going to help him get this one right. No one asked where I lived now, how I'd gotten there, what my life looked like. And I realized something. I didn't feel hurt. I felt detached. like watching a familiar movie with new eyes. When she called us to the table, my pulse picked up, not from fear but anticipation. I took my old seat, off to the side. Same table. Different person. Dinner began exactly as it always had. And that's when Alex opened his mouth. Alex leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. Like this table, this house, this narrative had always belonged to him. Mom passed him the mashed potatoes first, as usual, laughed at a joke that didn't deserve it, asked follow-up questions about his new venture with the kind of focus she'd never once given me. "So here's the thing," Alex said, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "Online sports gear, niche branding, direct-to-consumer. The market's wide open if you know what you're doing." My mom nodded enthusiastically. And of course, I told him I'd help however I can. A little push now, and he'll be unstoppable. She glanced at me like she expected agreement, like I was still part of the support staff. I took a sip of water and kept my face neutral. The conversation flowed right past me, the way it always had. His workout routine, his ideas, a guy he knew who almost made it to the NFL. I could have vanished and nothing would have changed. Then my mom turned to me, fork hovering over her plate. "So, Emily," she said, voice thinning into polite obligation, "you're still doing your computer job, right? That app thing." I set my fork down gently. "Yeah," I said, "still working on it." She smiled, visibly relieved she didn't have to ask more. "As long as you're paying your bills," she said, like I was a teenager babysitting for gas money. Alex smirked. "Come on, Mom," he said. "You know Emily, she's fine, she's got her little project." Then he looked straight at me. "Seriously, though," he added, tone sharpening just enough to sting, "are you still wasting your time on that worthless company?" There it was. That word. Worthless. I felt it land, not in my chest, but somewhere behind me, like an echo from a life I'd already outgrown. I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't defend. I just shrugged. "Actually," I said casually, "I sold my company." The silence was immediate and violent. My mom froze mid-bite. Alex let out a short laugh, like he'd misheard. "You sold it," he said, making air quotes. "Okay, to who?" "A healthcare group." He rolled his eyes. "And what, you got a couple $100,000, enough to move out of your shoebox apartment." "How much?" my mom asked quietly. I let the silence stretch, let them feel it. $150 million. Alex's mouth fell open. Not figuratively, physically. My mom's fork slipped from her hand and hit the plate with a sharp clang. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost unreal. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The fridge hummed in the next room. Christmas lights blinked lazily in the window. "That's not funny," my mom whispered. "That's not a joke you make." "I'm not joking," I said. Alex shook his head, already angry. "You're lying. Nobody pays that kind of money for some stupid phone app." I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and turned the screen toward them. I'd left my banking app open. The number sat there, long and unmistakable, commas stacked like proof. "This is after taxes," I said quietly. "After paying my team, after everything." My mom leaned in, lips moving as she tried to count the zeros. Alex grabbed the phone from her, hands shaking. Scrolled, refreshed, scrolled again. Then he pulled out his own phone and started typing furiously. I watched his reflection in the glass of the cabinet as my name appeared on his screen. An article headline, a photo, words he couldn't argue with. He stopped reading and looked up at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mom asked, tears pooling in her eyes. "How could you keep this from your own family?" I let out a breath that carried years with it. "You mean like you kept everything for Alex?" I said. "The private school, the trips, the $100,000 for a startup that failed, the way you forgot my birthdays or handed me grocery store cake while you flew down to move him into Stanford." Her mouth opened, closed. That's not fair, she said weakly. We did our best. No, I said, sharper now. You did your best for him. Alex slammed his hand on the table. Glasses rattled. So what? He snapped. You think you're better than us now? You got lucky, that's all. You're still the same weird little sister who hid in her room. I stood up slowly, napkin slipping to the floor. Luck didn't write a single line of code, I said. Luck didn't answer emails at 3 in the morning. Luck didn't say no to $50 million because it felt wrong. I looked at my mom. You gambled everything on the wrong child, I said quietly. And now you're angry because the one you ignored learned how to win without you. Her hand reached for my wrist. Emily, wait. We can talk about this. Maybe you could help Alex invest. We're family. There it was. Not I'm sorry. Help Alex. I pulled my hand back. I already stuck together, I said. You just never noticed. I picked up my coat. Merry Christmas. And I walked out. But walking away didn't end it. It only started what came next. The fallout didn't explode. It unraveled. I went back to my hotel that night and sat on the edge of the bed with the lights off, staring at the glow of the city through the window. I waited for the rush, the satisfaction, the moment where I felt victorious. It never came. What I felt instead was quiet, heavy, like a door had finally closed and the echo was still settling. My phone stayed silent for a few hours. Then the messages started. Long texts from my mom, swinging wildly between guilt and accusation. Family is family. You embarrassed your brother. You could have handled it differently. Weren't we good parents? Mixed in with softer lines. I always believed in you. I just didn't know. Alex followed, less poetic, calling me selfish, ungrateful, accusing me of turning my back on the people who raised me, of acting like money made me better than them. I didn't reply. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived at my office. A letter from a lawyer. They were demanding $3 million as compensation for years of support. Housing, food, education, sacrifice. I read it once. Then again. It felt surreal, like someone had put a price tag on a childhood they barely participated in. I handed it to my attorney without a word. He didn't hesitate. His response was calm, surgical, and devastating. He declined the demand, then attached a full financial breakdown pulled by my accountant, every private school payment, every tuition check, every dollar my parents had poured into Alex's failed ventures. And next to my name, 0. At the end, he added one sentence. If they continued, these records would become public. The reply came fast. We're dropping it. Let's forget lawyers. No apology, just retreat. Not long after, Alex started spiraling. He'd always been buoyed by belief that someone would catch him. When that belief cracked, he didn't know how to stand. He drank more, snapped at coworkers, missed shifts at Best Buy, one afternoon. He blew up at a customer who recorded the entire meltdown. The video hit a local Facebook group. People connected dots. Comments surfaced. Posts he'd made about his ungrateful rich sister. A week later, he was fired. His next big idea never launched. Credit card debt stacked up. A small business loan followed. My mom tried to save him like she always had, refinanced the house, poured what little she had left into his mess. It wasn't enough. Within a year, the house I grew up in was sold to cover debt. Karen moved into a small apartment. Her health declined. The relatives who'd watched her worship Alex from the sidelines pulled away quietly. Meanwhile, my life didn't explode. It expanded. I worked, spoke on panels, built a new company focused on mental health tools that actually helped people. I paid for therapy programs, funded scholarships, not loudly, not for credit. The next Christmas, I wasn't in Seattle. I was in Hawaii with friends, real friends, the kind who asked questions and waited for the answers. We swam, hiked, laughed, and watched the ocean swallow the sun. That night, I wired a large donation to a nonprofit that funds therapy for women who can't afford it. My phone buzzed. A message from a younger cousin. She said seeing my story made her feel less crazy for being the overlooked kid in her own house. I told her to call me anytime. She did. Months later, an envelope appeared on my desk. My mom's handwriting. Inside was an apology. Real, messy, late. She admitted favoritism, admitted she hadn't seen me, wrote that it took a headline about millions to realize what she'd thrown away. She asked for forgiveness, for another chance. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer. Because forgiveness isn't the same as access. And boundaries aren't punishment. They're survival. I didn't send money. I didn't rescue anyone. I chose myself. And that choice changed everything. Time did what distance alone couldn't. It softened the sharpest edges without erasing the truth. Years passed, quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no surprise reunions, just space, clean, intentional space. The kind that lets you finally hear your own thoughts without them being drowned out by expectation. I moved to a different city, not to run away, but to arrive somewhere new without a history attached to my name. Somewhere I was the other one. Somewhere I could just be Emily. My work grew steadily, not explosively, not loudly, steadily. The kind of growth built on systems, not luck. I hired carefully, fired slowly, learned how to lead without becoming hard, learned that power doesn't have to announce itself to be real. Every now and then, news found its way to me. Alex bounced between jobs, promised change, broke it, promised again. My mom aged faster than she should have. The years of stress finally showed. She reached out once more, this time shorter, quieter, no requests, just updates. Whether a doctor's appointment, a mention of the past without rewriting it. I replied politely, kindly, briefly. Boundaries held. Then one afternoon, during a panel discussion on resilience, a woman in the audience raised her hand. She was nervous, voice shaking. "How do you deal," she asked, "with being successful after being told your whole life that you weren't enough?" The room went still. I smiled, not because it was easy, but because I knew the answer now. "You stop auditioning for people who already decided not to see you," I said, "and you build a life that doesn't require their permission." After the talk, she hugged me and cried. I didn't ask her story. I didn't need to. Some wounds speak the same language. That night, I went home and opened the drawer where I'd kept my mother's letter. I read it again. This time, it didn't hurt. I realized something then. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's the absence of pain where pain used to live. I wrote her back. Not a reunion letter, not a forgiveness speech, just honesty. I told her I wished her peace, that I hoped she was taking care of herself, that I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't available either. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I simply ended it with my name. Emily. No titles, no defenses. Just me. Months later, I adopted a dog, a nervous little thing from a shelter that flinched at loud sounds and didn't trust easily. We learned each other slowly. Patience became routine. Love became quiet. One evening, as she slept curled against my leg, I understood something that would have changed everything if I'd known it sooner. I was never invisible. I was just surrounded by people who refused to look. And that wasn't my failure. Success didn't heal me. Clarity did. Walking away didn't make me cold. It made me whole. Some families teach you how to belong. Others teach you how to leave. Both are lessons. I finally learned mine. And I never apologized for surviving again.